Hello. I am Karen Jean-François, and this is the Women in Data podcast. Today, I am joined by Bindu Bakrania, who heads up the analytics teams for capital investment at Legal & General. Driven by a passion for math and coding from a very young age, Bindu has built an impressive career in data analytics, growing from being a hands-on analyst to shaping data strategy and driving data culture in her organization. In this conversation, Bindu shares her journey from risk analyst to data leaders, offering invaluable advice on career progression in the field. We talk about the importance of strategic moves, including sideways moves to build breadth of experience, how stepping out of analytics roles can provide business perspective, building relationships and network, developing leadership skills and finding your authentic leadership style. And I want to say, most importantly, how to manage time and context switching as you progress to more senior roles. I don't know for you, but I definitely need more advice on that one. In summary, you will gain practical tips on advancing your career in data, insights on balancing technical and business skills, and inspiration from Bindu's experience. If you have not done so yet, make sure you follow us on LinkedIn and register to the Women in Data community. It's free. All right, let's get straight to it. Hi, Bindu. Thank you so much for joining me on the Women in Data podcast. It's a pleasure to have you with me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited about this conversation we are going to have because we're going to be talking about a journey that I am on myself, and I can't wait to hear all of your tips. But before we get into that, can I invite you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Bindu Bakrania. I currently head up the data analytics team for capital investments within private markets within Legal & General.
Wow, that just sounds like a massive responsibility, I have to say.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So I've got everything within my remit to do with data, from shaping the data strategy through to execution of that strategy, and actually everything from the data engineering to the tooling through to doing your analytics, your data visualization, your data management, and of course kind of shaping and driving the data culture in our organization as well.
Yeah, in a really big organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Although we are a small division, or we were a small, we're a small part of the overall Legal & General business.
All right. And how did you get there, really?
So interesting, really. I always was always really passionate about maths and data and coding, and from a really young age I used to try and code on my Acorn Electron back in the day. So I think I just got into coding from a really young age, and I was always very good at maths as well. So I studied in a very numerate degree, and then that's how I landed my first job in data and analytics, where I actually started as a risk analyst coding in mainframe SAS back in the day. So for anybody that knows mainframe SAS, you'll know how painful that was. And yes, I'm still here in this career. So that was quite, it was quite a good entry into data and analytics to begin with, because that was kind of the field that I studied in. And then I guess my career just took on from there, really.
This is super interesting, and I love hearing that. But you also do quite a bit around women in data and all these type of things.
Yeah, I absolutely do. So I'm super passionate about women in data. I think for me, having come up through my career, I really wish actually when I was more junior in my career, I had those role models that I could look up to and take inspiration from. And now I think there's so many inspirational role models in our field. It's brilliant. But also when you're quite junior, you kind of don't really know where to go and how to navigate your career. So I first got involved in women in data probably about 8 years ago. And that was born out of my own kind of challenges that I was facing in my career and how to get more senior. And from there, I, in my last organization, set up an internal network to help others. And then similarly, moving organization, very similar. So I lead actually the brand partnership here, and I sit on the steerco, but I've also stood up our own network internally here in our organization so that, I can help shape other people's careers and help them and build that community and that support network for others as well.
I might come and ask you for tips on setting the internal network at some point.
Yeah, please do. Please do. Super passionate about it.
Yeah, I think we came across women in data for similar reasons. It was issues we were having in our careers. So thankfully, I found women in data not super early, but I was still early-ish mid-level analyst. So that's been very, very helpful. And you mentioned that you started as a risk analyst working with SaaS. I was working with SaaS as well. It's very funny now. You don't find that many, or they don't say it as much as they used to. I don't know which one it is. But then you moved on and you're now heading the whole team and then all the data strategy for your area of the business. I would love to hear about how it is that this happened and then what are the key steps that helped you in that journey. And because this is a journey that a lot of us are going to go through.
Absolutely. So, firstly, did I ever think that I would be in this kind of role, heading up entire data team? Absolutely not. I mean, imposter syndrome would always kick in through my career, which I'm sure many people have faced, right? And there are times that I still face that. I remember moving into this particular role, and it's very different in terms of the roles that I've had previously. And within 2 weeks, I was like, what have I done? Like, why did I think this role would be the right one for me? But I think, it's about really thinking about what do you want to achieve? What are you passionate about? And where do you want to take your career? What do you want to be known for? And then comes, how do I go and achieve that? Right. But certainly when I was starting my career, I never ever imagined that I would be a senior as I am, nor having worked on some of the big data initiatives that I've worked on in my career either.
I totally agree. I think these three questions that you mentioned. So what do I want to achieve? What do I want to be known for? And then how do I go and do that? These are very important. The first one probably being the most complicated. But yeah. Maybe not the first one, maybe the second one. I don't know. I just feel like the third one might be the easiest. But definitely. So are there any key steps that you took that helped you in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, touching upon what I said already, I think really just think about your career moves carefully and when you're looking at moving into different roles, why? How does that role help build on your experience and get you closer to the goals that you might have? For me, it was always being the best that I could be, right? And feeling fulfilled and motivated in the roles that I was undertaking. But actually what I then found was, as I was thinking about my next moves, what were they bringing to me and how were they helping me continue that development journey? So I think that's really, really important. And actually with that came quite a lot of sideways moves in my career. So a lot of people always think, your next move has to always be a promotion. It has to be a promotion. It has to be a promotion, right? And a lot of people might navigate their career in that way. I spent actually 10 years prior to coming here moving sideways because that helped me really build the breadth of my experience by going and experiencing different roles, different areas of the business. It wasn't just all about moving up for that next level. And actually that breadth really helped me build my rounded skill set. And I think that's super, super important because even when I've been managing teams, a lot of the conversations you have around development are people like, well, I want to get the next level and I want to get promoted. And as a leader now, a lot of my conversations with the team around, but why is that? And actually to get to where you want to get to, you're actually better off sometimes doing those sideways moves first, because that will leave you more rounded and therefore more confident when you take on some of those bigger roles and not feel like you can't perform in that role or you're out of your depth.
Yeah, that's very interesting and very important to highlight. So you know how culturally we tend to think career ladder like and all these things. And in case I haven't plugged it in a while in the podcast, Squiggly Careers, the amazing podcast, which everyone knows I'm a big groupie for. That's what they address, right? Is the fact that our career does not have to be ladder-like anymore in the world we live in. And actually moving sideways is very important for us, and it can bring a lot of fulfillment. But it's still very hard to detach yourself from this. Because when you think about progression and the way we're thinking about progression is really the next step of the next bigger salary.
Absolutely. And actually, the other thing that I did in my career is I stepped out of data analytics for a short period. I went and actually took on a role in the business, and I was managing a product and therefore was managing the P&L for that product. And that gave me a really different perspective, because actually for the first time, I was that business stakeholder ultimately that needed to then use the analytics team to support my initiatives. And suddenly you understand the pressure that comes on the other side, and why sometimes things will be last minute, or you might not have all the context. And it was like, for me, it was really fascinating, because actually having been in an analytics role for so long and then being on the other side, it just gave me a really different insight. And actually then when I went back into an analytics role, I kind of was even more rounded, because I could really empathize with the business, and I could empathize with the pressures, and I could empathize with, a senior stakeholder, or your CEO has asked you to come last minute to talk about something, and you need all of this data and analysis, and why then you get some of the last minute requests that data teams tend to face. So for me, it was really, really valuable in my career, actually, just having that little step out of analytics, because then going back into analytics, it just helps me become even more rounded, and be able to build those relationships with the business in a much better way, because I had that understanding and the empathy on the other side as well.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree. I'm thinking I'm living this right now. So I stepped a bit out of analytics, not out of data, but working in products. And it definitely feels like a whole different world sometimes, and working with analytics to deliver something is quite different than working in analytics to deliver something. But that also reminds me of a conversation I heard on the Hub and Spoke data. So that's the data that's led by Jason Foster from Synology. And then he was speaking with Barry Panayi, and they were talking about how, as data individuals, we're also thinking about our career path within data, but then how helpful we can be if we were stepping outside of data and into the business, and how that can give you a lot of leverage. So it's very interesting to see that you've been doing that and you're seeing the value of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think what's really important as a data team is, depending on the model that the organization adopts, is not to see yourself as a separate team, is always think about yourself as embedded within that business that you work within, and really, make a point of learning about the business and getting to know the business and getting to know the individuals, because actually those individuals start to form part of your network as well. And using your network both in a business context and in a data context is just super, super important to be successful in a career in data, I think. And if I look at kind of my career path, building those relationships on both sides were really important, because you don't know the business, right? The business SMEs know the business, but why are they going to give you their time? And you've got to really think about, how are you going to get yourself in front of the business to learn about what they do? Because actually, if you can understand what the business do, data to me is just data, right? It's the context comes in that data by understanding what the business is. And that's where you really start to add the value, and that network becomes super important as you start to think about moving into more of a leadership role as well.
Yeah, definitely. And just so, we're talking about the importance of the network right now, and how this relationship will help you as well. But just on the side move, I wanted to come back to that very quickly. What kind of roles do you feel would be a good move for if someone was saying, okay, maybe I can move sideways into the business right now, are there any particular roles that you feel are better than others to do these type of things and to learn the skills? Or
I think it really varies, right? Organization to organization, where you want to take your career path
yeah,
as to the next type of role that you will take. And if I think about my own journey, I was at a point where I was doing all of the analytics for a proposition or a product. I wasn't the decision maker as to whether we actually then undertook the recommendation or not. That lied in the hands of somebody else. So my business role then actually made me that decision maker, right? So it was elevating my career in a way that was taking me from where I was in analytics to that next stage. I think depending on where you are from a seniority perspective, where you want to take your career will really depend upon what that role is. And I think that's where development conversations and owning your career development with your line manager also start to play a part of that, because I think, everybody's an individual, everybody's career path into data, I think, is very different, right? I work with lots of different people who have taken very non-traditional routes into data. I've come up kind of through the ranks, having studied a numeric degree, and always been in this field. But I think, really owning those career development conversations will then help identify the right opportunities, whether that's actually within data or actually within the business and a business type of role. But I definitely recommend, where there's opportunity, people either step out or do a secondment, or, do something like job shadowing or something with the business, because it really, with any data role that you do, understanding the business is critical to the success of you as an individual in that role.
yeah. I remember having a development conversation with my manager few months ago now, and he told me, Karen, are you sure analytics is where you want to be? And I had a bit of a panic moment thinking, oh my gosh, but I've only ever known about analytics. Why would I want to do something else? And listening to you, I'm thinking maybe I should be open to something different than analytics. Let's see. But is there anything else? So you talked about, the power of moving sideways, moving into the business, how networking is supporting this journey from hands-on analyst to leader, and also the power of the development conversations with your manager. Was there anything else that really helped you in that journey?
I'd say actually thinking about then leadership from a people leadership perspective, I think there's a couple of things for me. So one is, like, start small. When you start leading others, and you've never done it before, you're also finding your feet with that, right? So there's the piece around kind of the strategy and working with the business, but actually, how do you start leading others and actually starting small? So, I remember my very first leadership role, I had one direct report. I learned so much through period. And as the years went on, I moved up to 5 direct reports and 10 and 15. And my last role was 30 direct reports. It takes a very different skill as you start to lead others as well, because also actually they're looking at you for support and guidance and to help them shape their careers. So I think linked with that is, thinking about what kind of leader do you also want to be, and how can you be that role model for others from a leader? Because, let's be honest, I'm sure we've all had leaders that we've looked at and we've gone, oh my God, I really do not want to be like you. And then other leaders where you're like, wow, like, you're just amazing. And there's so much respect there. So I think, really think inwards as well about yourself, but ensuring that you don't lose your authentic self through that. And then the only final thing that I'd say is, in order to be successful, I think, everything that I've said already, but actually think about your own time and how you block time out to think and refocus, especially, like, we've probably all been there as well as leaders, where you're just back to back in meetings all day long. You have 2 minutes to think. You're not really being effective. And I've been there in my career, right? And I've learned a lot through that around, it's just not healthy running back to back from meetings because you don't get time to really just think or prepare well for the outcomes that you need to get from the next conversation. So how do you really just think about that time blocking, but also depending on the types of roles, you might need to be context switching continuously as a leader. So it's really important to make that time available in your diary just to kind of refocus a little bit, that allows you to really focus on that next meeting that you're going to have and making sure that you're fully present in that conversation. And actually, to be fair, that's the same as whether you're an analyst or a leader. You're always going to go into different meetings, and if you're just busy and you're running from one thing to another, you're not going to really be as effective as you probably could be.
Yeah, this context switching is something that is so key, right? Because, well, we all know that the human brain is not good at multitasking. It's not built for that. Even if we're trying to kid ourselves, being like, I can multitask, it is not a thing. But what I've noticed is as I progressed in my career, so when I was an analyst, in the first couple of years, I always had someone telling me what to do, when to do it, and then when to deliver and all these things. So I could laser focus one task at a time. And then as you grow into your career, into your roles, and get towards leadership position, then you have to do so many different things. So you were talking about managing the people side, so managing your team, helping them grow, but also leading the strategy side and leading the roadmaps and all these things. And there are loads of different projects that your team are working on, and you need to work with your stakeholders and make sure that the business understand what data does. And that there is so much going on here, that it's true that making space to, I guess, download all of that and then go to your next conversation, not thinking about what you were thinking about before, is quite key.
Super important, and especially if you're trying to drive a decision or a very specific outcome. I think it's really important that you've spent the time to really prepare for whatever that outcome is that you're trying to get from that next conversation that you go into.
So when you're talking about blocking time, I'm guessing, like, for me, one of the big problems I have with that is I will block time and then there is always someone that's going to ask me for more time, or there's going to be myself asking for more time from me, being like, yeah, but I can do this, continue on this. And then what that means is that this time goes, but there are also, I mean, so many demands on loads of different things. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, interesting. I'm going to be honest. I used to really struggle. So I used to time block, and then somebody would come to me. They'd need something. I really struggled to say no and protect that time. But actually, with anything, you've got to think about the value. So that time that I give up, how is that going to help me and that other person in that moment? So it might be really, really critical for that person to get you right now. But if that means that you're not going to get something that's really, really important for you done, and that squeezes you somewhere else, it's just making those trade-offs. And I think with anything, when you're giving your time away or you're not doing something that somebody is wanting you to do, just think about that rationale, right? How do you explain why you're not doing something, but what can you do? So it might be, well, I'm really sorry, I can't do this right now, but if you come back to me in 2 hours time, I promise that I'll make the time available, or I promise that I'll make the time available tomorrow at whatever time. And that goes the same with, as an analytics team, you're always inundated with people wanting you to deliver work, right? And you can't do it all because actually there's not an infinite amount of resource. So how do you really provide that rationale and give them the reasoning and potentially the alternatives, right? And again, if you've then said that you can't do something, but you can do something else, or come back to me tomorrow, make sure you say that. You make sure you do what you say you will do, because that's how you build trust, and that's how you build credibility, and that's how you build your reputation. There's nothing worse than somebody saying, come back to me tomorrow, and then tomorrow comes and then they bumped you again and again and again.
I agree. And I think when things get busy, we tend to forget that and maybe get a bit upset that people are coming to us, but we're also here to support, and we just need to be able to manage that a better way. Is there anything that you wish you had done differently?
Yeah, so there's a few things that I think on reflection I probably would have done differently. But I think for me, the biggest thing comes down to my own self-confidence but really just believing in myself that I was good at what I did. I was always one of these people, and to some degree I still can be, where I just prefer to sit in the background. So as much as I champion my team, I never did it for myself. Like, I never volunteered for opportunities where I would be speaking in front of other people because I hated the attention on me. I hated talking about my own successes. And actually, I think I probably should have been a bit more braver and bolder and worked with my previous line managers around how we could create those opportunities, a bit like how I do those for my team, but how could I have done that for myself a little bit more? And I also think, I didn't really use I didn't use my network, and I certainly didn't really have any mentors as I was coming up in my more junior years in my career. And I think actually by using some of the more senior people in a bit more of a mentorship capacity and using that network that I had, probably would have helped me in those earlier years of my career a bit more as well.
I wonder if we actually had the opportunity to do that. I mean, it's not the opportunity, but you know how now it's everywhere you go, people are going to say you need to network, you need to find a mentor. And I don't remember seeing that earlier on in the career.
No, I don't either. And I'll be honest, I think when people were talking about mentorship earlier on in the years, it was very much, well, a one-on-one. You find one person and that person is your mentor. And actually, as I've grown through my career, I use different people for different reasons. It's not a one-on-one, and it's not a every 4 weeks we meet and we talk about things. It's very sporadic, as and when I need a bit of a sounding board. That I use different people for different perspectives on different things. And again, as I've got more senior in my career, I actually use external people in the industry, as well as internal people in my organization. So I think, mentorship, absolutely support it, but I think it's no longer that traditional, how we've talked about it as you find one person and then they're the person that you talk to about everything. It's finding the right people with the right skills that can help you in those areas that you identify for your own career.
I agree. And Bindu, I could go on with this conversation forever because I am learning so much and I am loving it. But if we don't want my editing team to kill me for a too long episode, I would like to move on to the quick fireside questions. So I've got 5 questions for you. And the first one being, what is one skill that has been the most valuable in your career in data?
Oh my gosh. Okay, that's like really difficult for one. So I'm going to quickly throw out 3 things, right? One, be inquisitive. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid to ask for feedback.
I love that, especially the last one. People don't always give it back, but definitely ask for it. The second question is, what's your proudest achievement in the data field?
Oh my God. Again, really, really, you were really testing me, Karen. Really difficult. Too many. I think I'm going to go for just actually being trusted to deliver some of the large data programs that I've delivered in my career, but also from a personal perspective, actually doing things like this, right? Getting out there and speaking at conferences and actually starting to be braver with things like this. So yeah, I'll probably say that.
I love that. What is one thing that you wish more people understood about data?
Oh gosh, how much time have you got? So I'm going to say data matters, right? And whilst data and technology go hand in hand, they're not the same thing. Like data needs a seat at the table. It shouldn't be an afterthought. The data quality and the way in which you build your systems to pass data through is so, so important, because actually it's your data teams that have the problem at the other end, and nobody understands then why things are taking so long. And it's generally because your systems haven't been built in the right way with the right quality controls in place at the onset that then cause the downstream impacts for your engineering and analytics teams.
Yeah, that's very funny because I'm thinking, yes, this is so important. And I've thought about that all my career, and I'm building products right now, and I'm realizing that it's so easy to forget about the data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
If data were a superpower, what would be your superhero name?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so here's a funny one. I'm going to go with the data fairy godmother because I was recently called that by a colleague in the business that I work with. And she said, I come in and I solve all of their data problems. So I'm going to go for the data fairy godmother.
This is such a good one. I love it. And I love that you've got proof that this is actually your superhero
Yeah.
name. And the last question is, if you weren't in data, what career do you think you would have?
Oh, absolutely something to do with travel or event planning because I'm absolutely a planner. I love exploring, but also I think about every single little detail and that comes out in the work that I do as well. So I definitely think something around event planning or travel or the two linked together would have been probably where my passion would have been.
Now I understand why you're leading the internal communities at work. So you're kind of doing it, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, like, all of the women in data events and stuff, I absolutely thrive on it. Absolutely thrive on it. And it's so different to working with data day in, day out, the event planning. It's just so very different. So yeah, I absolutely love it.
That's very true. Well, Bindu, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you for listening to the Women in Data podcast.
We will be back in a couple of weeks. Until then, we would be very grateful if you could leave us a rating or a review, as it helps us not only to make the podcast more visible, but also to enhance the content.
And if you don't want to miss the next episode, follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We're also on LinkedIn.
Don't forget to register to the Women in Data community. It's free. All you need to do is head to womenindata.co.uk.
Have a great day!
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.